Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. A bit of a different kind of stream today. Thanks for everybody who's turned up in the chat. I know it's different than the usual kind of lawn bashing, shall we say, or TCAP generated content. But wanted to kind of do something a little bit different. There's been an HBO documentary. I think it was broadcast in the US a few months ago, but we only got it here. Within the last week. I'm here with my good friend Adam, who I've just dragged away from bullying poor innocent fucking scammers. And all they're trying to do is earn a living, you selfish bastard.
I know. That's what they were telling me last week, but I just, I've got to take out this aggression on someone.
That's true. I mean, you could get a punching bag.
Mm. Yeah, but then there's no victim.
That's true. Yeah, unless the noise is pissing the neighbours off or something. Unless you use a human punching bag.
Well, yeah, but there's just too much red tape.
Yeah, I mean, manslaughter charges. I mean, we've seen it all,
Exactly.
haven't we? So, you told me about this. Say a quick hello to everybody who's in the chat. The last tanker, hello, dude. You've been around my streams for a long time. It's good to see you. Came here for Adam's channel, Nietzsche's Ghost.
Nietzsche. Come on,
Nietzsche.
Andy.
Yeah, sorry, Nietzsche, the famous philosopher who I've got a book about and I can't even pronounce the name. That's so obviously I've paid a lot of attention to that. But thanks for coming down, everybody. So yeah, you told me about this documentary, and I was like, this looks cool, and I've made some notes as I've been watching it. Adam, as my guest, do you want to just give a quick summary about what this actual case is about?
Yeah, okay, actually, it was a friend recommended it to me, and I had never heard of it at all. And I was like, that sounds right up my street. And it's this I think it happened in 2014, but this couple had sort of been maintaining a relationship through text message for maybe a couple of years, quite some, or a while at least, a good few months. But it had been a very odd kind of relationship. I think they'd only met up with each other in person a handful of times, but they sort of were a lot more romantic towards each other through text messages. At the same time, they also had this sort of odd competitiveness. And I've got to be kind of careful in how I explain the story now that it doesn't give people bias one way or another. But basically, the guy was suicidal, often talked of having thoughts of suicide, and this girl, Michelle Carter, she texted him and kind of encouraged him to take his own life until eventually he did do exactly that. But the whole case, maybe I shouldn't blow that open too early. Do you want to sort of discuss your thoughts on the case first, Andy?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important that we give a bit of context for somebody who's not seen the documentary or heard about the case. I spoke to someone earlier, they were familiar with the case, but not exactly watched the documentary. So, I mean, we can actually say that we can't really... Well, I suppose we can start and say that this relationship, it's not very clear in the documentary. It seems to be predominantly online. There's so many elements to this because you've got a complicated relationship between two people that have mental health problems. There's a lot of factors, and it's a reflection on the sort of troubles that young people can have growing up. The girl, Michelle Carter, when I first heard about the case, I was like, right, okay. She's texted this guy and said, kill yourself, or words to that effect, and he's gone and done it. It's a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of factors which we can talk about.
Well, you can't. He brought up suicide a lot, and it sort of leaves it quite late in the documentary to discuss it. But there is a point where they sort of talk about how he keeps saying he wants to do it, but he's too much of a coward. But he keeps talking about it, and like at points, he even quite cruelly will say, "I'm going to kill myself," and she'll say, "Please don't," and he'll just disappear off for a day. and she's just left thinking he's already killed himself. So there is an element where you could almost say, and of course, I still haven't formed my exact opinion on this totally, but there is an element where you could almost say, well, I think in her mind, to an extent, she thought she was helping him do what he truly wanted by encouraging him. And the thing I was going to mention before, like the whole case kind of rests. The reason she actually got jail time, and we'll go into her sentencing shortly, but because it didn't happen until actually fairly recently. Like she didn't actually get put behind bars until fairly recently. But the whole case rests on the fact that when he was in his car, because basically the guy killed himself by carbon monoxide poisoning, so using a generator and a water pump to filter the toxic gases from his car engine into his car. But apparently he got out of the car and called her and said, and she said, get back in the fucking car and do it. But that wasn't actually a text.
Exactly. Oh, Shin's here. Hi, Shin.
Hey,
Yeah, that wasn't. This is what really confused me, and they left it to the end. I mean, we might as well tell people we can say exactly what's happened. We're not, it's not a fucking.
yeah, well, if you don't want spoilers, then
Yeah, exactly. If you don't want spoilers for this documentary, you're in the wrong place. But basically, what happened was, it was alleged during the trial that I think I'm believing this right, because it was difficult to comprehend in the way it was edited together. But she sent him. It was believed she sent him a text message to say get back in the truck. So what had happened is he'd set up his truck or vehicle to kill himself from carbon monoxide poisoning. He got out of the vehicle and texted her, this is alleged, and she texted back and said, get back in the vehicle.
This is a phone call, because she says to her friend, I think her name's Samantha or something like that, and she sends a message to her friend maybe a month or 2 months after his actual death saying, I told him to get back in the truck. But there's no physical evidence of this. This is just like what she has said, she said. However, her whole, like the verdict that the judge gave her, because they decided not to go in front of a jury which would have been made up of her peers, which would have been people her age, and they decided it wouldn't be a good idea to go in front of a jury because sort of, early 20s, late teenagers are a lot more guided by their emotions than perhaps a jury made up of middle-aged people. So they decided to leave the sentencing to the judge himself. But the judge actually made his decision of what was it? It was a long time, like 15 years.
Yeah. It was a considerable sentence, and it changed. Well, I don't think it was. You mean what she ended up with, or what he originally said?
Yeah. But well, she was on bail until very recently, but now she's been. But the judge basically made his decision. Like when he first gave his verdict, he talks about it and almost says, at the end of the day, his actions are his actions, and then it sort of turns on a pinhead, and she says, and he says, but because you told him to get back in the car, that you are guilty of what is it, reckless, something like that, reckless behavior in text that basically means you're guilty of manslaughter.
Recklessness. However,
yeah. So, but that's based on a piece of evidence that's only in a text she sent to her friend. There's no actual proof she said that to him.
Yeah, endangerment, Shin's just put it, being a resident legal expert. It's an interesting, reckless endangerment. Thanks, pal. It's an interesting case because it was brought up early in the documentary, and it's something I thought about. In America, free speech is a big thing, and it was even mentioned that where do you draw the line? Now, of course, when you're saying something like, or allegedly saying something like, get back in a truck, and is that where free speech, your right to free speech, you're impinging on other laws? It's a complicated process because we know how dearly that the US holds the constitutional rights. That was a case. She said those words to him, allegedly, but there was no, and it sort of, I'm not sure if it was the right thing to leave it till the end, but basically, why didn't the defense make a bigger deal about it that she never actually said that? It was something that she'd relayed to somebody else at a later date and said, I told him to get back in the truck, or words to that effect, wasn't it?
Well, perhaps. I mean, the thing is, she said that she said it. We don't know, and perhaps she did say it, and she never said to the defense. I mean, perhaps better defense lawyer who had looked
No, I don't
more.
think it was that simple. I don't think that defence lawyer
No,
would have missed something so obvious,
I'm not.
but I couldn't understand why it wasn't brought up in defence that.
In the documentary, we only see parts of the case, don't we? So only like the most important parts, and really the most the courtroom stuff in the documentary is the closing statements.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was two. You had a first hour documentary which is about setting the scene, and then the second part was mainly the court case. Um,
But taking the whole get back in the car out of the window, we know from the text that she was encouraging him for quite a while to
yes,
take his life.
yes. Um,
Um,
there's initially, if you would look at this case from the surface, and a lot of people have this opinion, they're thinking, you're twisted. If you love somebody, I mean, just to give some people more context, she was claiming that this guy was the love of her life. I love you more than anything. It seemed to be reciprocated, although the relationship, and it kind of uncovered it a little bit more towards the end of the documentary, wasn't. It was quite toxic. With regard to, he would osculate. He had Conrad. I mean, I suppose it goes without saying. I don't want to say something that's plainly obvious. He had, severe depression.
he had a lot going for him, though. I mean, he had a captain's license for boats at 18. I mean, that's really quite impressive.
He came from a bit of a toxic. His parents were going through a messy divorce, and I must admit, he didn't seem to be balanced, the father, like from his behaviour during the brief moments that I saw him. He just looked a bit disconnected, but I suppose you can't really judge somebody in those circumstances when your son is, been killed, has committed suicide. But there's, I suppose what I'm trying to get at, and it's something we can discuss in more detail, is that neither person was a balanced mind. There's so many factors. I never think anything is black and white, really. There's very few things, in my opinion. Everything's a shade of grey, and you have to dig beneath the surface and make an informed decision. With regard to his mental health, it was really fucking interesting when you start digging into Michelle's past. She's a pretty girl, as you can see on the photo there. She's good looking. She had a really rocky time growing up when she was in her adolescence. She had an eating disorder. She was anorexic. She tried to kill herself. Did it go into detail about?
He tried to kill herself. I didn't know she had tried to kill herself.
She mentioned it, didn't she? She was. I don't think there was a physical.
He'd gone into like a rehabilitation facility, hadn't he? After trying to kill himself the first time, so he had attempted it before.
But
I'm getting a little bit of feedback when you're talking. Is your mic slightly unplugged or something?
No, I've got you on headphones.
Oh.
Professionalism, guys. Are you listening?
Sorry. But I just thought, I bet if I say it now and we can get it fixed, it's better than carrying on with it, because it's. Can you not hear it at all?
No. Is it okay in the chat, everybody? The audio? You just let me know if there's an issue. Nobody's said anything yet.
No.
But already it stirred a bit of discussion in the chat, and that's good. I mean, it's an interesting case. I don't have a clear-cut opinion. I have some interesting points to raise, but it's a really complicated matter. Because there's many things that we can talk about. We can talk about her age, because she was 17. This is a big thing for me, and it was prevalent when I was looking at the Vincent Ambrosio case. I know he was 19 over the, technically an adult, but it's a biological fact. I've not done the science myself, but if what I've read is true, the brain doesn't really stop developing until you're in your early to late mid-20s. So really, your brain's mush at 17, 18. I'm not saying that you're not responsible for your own actions, but what I do believe is that your judgment isn't as grounded as what it would be in adult life. That's something that we could talk about later when we talk about what the sentencing was. And also, she craved attention. That was a major factor in the overall case, is that she, I don't think it's unfair to say that a lot of girls that age do. It was mentioned by one of the experts during the documentary that you know, there's when when males have a skirt of females, it's because they're coercive and they can be, you know, massively attention seeking. A lot of humans are that way, but you know, but with women, it's very difficult when they're growing up because there's so much pressure on them to look good, to be cool, to have all the right friends, and she felt lonely. She was massively insecure. So that's a major factor in what contributed to her behaviour towards him. So I mean, it's not clear cut, is it? Is what I'm getting at.
It's not. I mean, it's a really intriguing case because, on the one hand, you can say, well, at the end of the day, he's responsible for his actions, but at the same time, we know for a fact he was coerced to an extent, although it hadn't always been like that. And I think part of that, like both of them have sort of mental problems or mental issues, I should say. But I think some part of her in her mind thought she was helping him to do what he really. But it all gets really weird after he actually passes away, and she starts like wanting to become a friend of family, asking for stitches and belongings.
Yeah, you're breaking up at the minute, Adam. Getting some. Is this signal?
I thought that's coming from.
No, that's all right. It's okay now.
Is it? I've had static this whole time.
Right. Just let me know, guys. What the problem is with the audio.
They said it's not too bad. It sounds like it's raining, but I think it's a little. Yeah, Amanda James just said audio is not great.
Static. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think. Let me try and.
It's definitely. It's worse on my side, but it seems when we stop talking, it gets really bad.
Right. I don't know what to suggest really.
Hold on a second. Oh, I thought it'd stop. It stopped now. Has it?
I can only hear. Could you better? Right. Okay. That's helping. Right. Okay. I think you there, dude.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Right. Okay. Right. I think we're okay now.
I'm not. I can still hear it, but I'm gonna see if it's my connection. I'm gonna move inside. Bear with me. Sorry for the professionalism.
Oh well, people expect it from us. TCAT recipes. Good to see you, dude. I hope you're well. Yeah, move away from the usual TCAP stuff, but it's worse again. We don't usually have this problem, do we?
No. You haven't got like your headset. Has it got like two earpieces and one's hanging out your ear?
What do you mean two earpieces?
Like sometimes if you've got a headset with like two earpieces, but you leave one hanging out your ear, it picks up all the noise from the other one.
It is say two apps are using my mic. I don't know which two apps it is.
Yeah, because it's getting quite bad now, and I'm inside the house, so I'm pretty sure it's not my mic. Oh, that seems to. The static stopped.
Yeah, I temporarily turned my microphone off, so.
But we might have lost Andy. I don't know if anyone can hear me. Fixed, but there's no sound.
Can you hear me, dude? Can you hear me?
Yeah, but it's still. It stopped when you did whatever you did, but we couldn't hear you. Yeah, and then it started with.
Yeah, I turned my microphone off, so obviously that.
Oh, that's better. That's much better. I think.
We can live with it. Right. Okay. Right. Well.
Where were we?
Well, we were talking about her kind of past, weren't we, and her sort of psychological makeup and need for attention.
So we haven't. Yeah. So I mean, and of course, she asked for his ashes and see if she could have some of his belongings. But she also set up a whole charity event, didn't she? That was like for people with mental health problems. But did it in her own hometown and like had her photo taken with the softball teams that came to play in the event and stuff.
It was really disturbing when she was like talking about. It was all about her, wasn't it? She wanted the attention and things like that, and
Yeah,
she was kind of. There was a discussion that she had with someone else, and she said, "No, it's got to be in my hometown. I've got to be kind of basically what she was getting at. She needed to be the centre of attention, as
yeah.
Amanda James has just said, which is a bit worrying because even at that point, she still got that need for attention. Now that doesn't. I wouldn't say that necessarily means that she's more culpable of the act or not. It was already established, I should say, it was established at the end of the documentary, if you decided to look at it that way, is that this need for attention of hers was pretty strong. She was very insecure. She was texting her friends all the time saying, "Why won't you hang out with me?" And I think her neediness drew people away. I think that's what can happen sometimes, and not. It would seem that trying to make excuses for her behaviour, but of course, I'm just trying to understand. I don't think it's as simple as. It's a lot more complicated than just out of the blue. She's having a bad day and goes, right, okay, kill yourself, you tosser. You know what I mean? It's a long. Do you think there's an element of it that she wanted to alleviate his suffering?
I do. I think part of it is because if I'm not sure if it was actually in the documentary. I watched a couple more just sort of pieces on YouTube today from different news outlets, and there was a point where he was saying, "I'm going to kill myself," and she was saying, "Please don't. I'm here for you. You're the love of my life," and this sort of thing. But he could often be very what the word? Negging towards her.
Negging.
Hmm. Do you know what negging is?
Not really.
Okay, so it's like. To go up to a girl and say something like, hold on, oh wow, your hair's beautiful. That can't be your natural hair colour. It's like to sort of say something complimentary and then bring them down at the same time. Or like, oh, you've got the most beautiful eyes. You must wear contacts.
Yeah, Lorne did that in the chat log. Here we are, back to Lorne again. He kind of said, "Oh, I think you're beautiful. At least I think you do." It was kind of like,
Yeah, that's a form.
backhanded compliment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's more a control thing. I mean, to sort of going off on a bit of a tangent here, but that's more of a like, well, I think you do, no one else will. But negging's more like, I think it's more used in the terms of when you're first chatting someone up. So you sort of say something that's kind of complimentary,
That's
but
where
also
I'm going wrong then.
yeah, but also kind
Listen,
of.
sweetheart, you're not going to do any better than me. How about it?
Well, I've seen you say stuff like that all the time. You're like, whenever a girl says no, you're like, you're not going to do better than me, you bitch, until the bouncers drag you out.
That only happened once.
Well, yeah, once per night.
Once until it was barred from every pub in Barcelona.
Yeah. But yeah, so like he did a lot of negging. He was quite detrimental, I would say. And I would like to actually get my hands on the text from start to finish. But he was quite detrimental towards her mental health, and I think she was younger than him and a little bit more smitten, I think, than he was. I don't think he took the relationship as seriously as she did. And I don't know, part of it maybe something turned from sort of love into hate, but I still think even the way she talks to him and the fact like she continued texting him and calling him afterwards, and it could all be an act, who am I to say? But it sort of implies like this misplaced sense of she thought she was helping someone. It sort of shows, and it's like you're saying about them being kids and their brains not being fully developed yet, and they probably don't even understand the seriousness of what their actions can do or what they can say. And I think it was Nietzsche's Ghost said in the chat earlier, like that he had his own. So said, oh, hang on, what was it? I'll see if I can find the comment again.
Well, I kind of looking at the kind of issues that she had. She was trying to kind of she felt this deep sort of hole in her life that she was trying to fill with this relationship and studying these kind of, the show Glee and following these celebrities. It's kind of it kind of created a fake kind of value system in a way, which was so flimsy. And I think she just got caught up in it to a degree.
Sorry, I just found that comment though. So it was like she thinks he was crying out for help when he got out the car to call her. Like that was like, tell me there's something to live for, I guess at that point. But the thing is, at the same time, you have to bear in mind that he had told her many times before he was going to kill herself that night, and then he wouldn't call her back. Like I think she had this sort of misplaced sense of frustration that her emotions were being played with when they. And I'm not defending, I'm just trying to look at something from a different perspective. But when they first get together, he's like, oh, I feel shit. And she's trying to bring him up. But at the same time, he's like sort of occasionally being nice to her, but then occasionally winding her up. And I think something turned from love to sort of an overwhelming sense of frustration. Like, this guy keeps saying that he's going to kill himself. Well, fuck it, do it. I'll be your cheerleader in suicide. But I don't think the actual, the seriousness of death, I think, can sometimes be lost on younger people.
Yeah, I agree with the comments just been made. I don't think she can be said to have clean hands. I agree with that. It's just how culpable is she? Is it a murder? Is it a manslaughter? What is interesting, what you just said, Adam, just in case nobody is seeing the documentary, Conrad, before he took his own life, said to her quite clearly in a text message, if you ever tell anybody about my plan of suicide, I'll hate you forever. Or, and then she promised and said, I'll never tell anybody. At this point, you've got to make a decision yourself on, do you believe that will sway somebody of that age who's already psychologically very fragile, has battled suicidal tendencies herself, has massive eating disorder, really, really needy, insecure. It's a complicated issue as well. There's other elements that I want to get into as well. The age thing is massive in my opinion, but we can talk about that when we talk about the sentencing.
But the thing with a case like this as well, we'll never know the full nuances of it. Even though we've seen like their tens of thousands of text messages, they had phone calls quite often, I believe, as well. So we'll never be privy to what was said in those. Like with most things, there'll be a lot that you have to kind of just fill in the gaps yourself. So, I mean, luckily we're not the ones that had to judge or be juries, but there's a lot of things, a lot of different little things going on here which could sway you one way or another. I mean, I definitely wouldn't call her a murderer, but she did have she could have said stop, or she could have phoned the police or something. And I know what you just said, like that he had said, I'll hate you forever, but you'd just block them, wouldn't you? You'd be like, well, at least I've done the right thing. And they said in the documentary, didn't they, how she had like kind of this obsession with the show Glee, and how the guy from Glee had passed away, and yet they had kind of covered it in the show, and she would use lines directly taken from the show to talk about him. But she also sort of implies that she has a fantasy of kind of saving someone that's suicidal due to a film that she watches at some point as well. And you just wonder if maybe when he first starts threatening suicide earlier on, that's what she wanted. Then later she's just so kind of sick of him threatening it and not happening, that she just says, I'll do it. But really, if he did call her when he got out of the car and he went, I can't breathe, I don't know what I'm doing, she should have just then, called the police.
Of course, I mean, there's no question that her actions were incorrect, that they were wrong. In context with that situation, no one would ever say. The only way that you could maybe not justify, but you could understand someone's actions in that way if she said, get back in the truck, is if you were so dismayed with the suffering that you honestly believed that it was the better thing for them to die and go to heaven, because they were so at pain, and that was the only way out. Now, it would be a stretch for anybody who loves someone to say that. I'm not saying that that's the case there, because I don't believe it was that simple, but that's the only thing I can think of. And when you talk about that, you're getting onto the role of assisted suicides there, which is illegal in a lot of countries. And legal in, there was a whole situation with the lady who was suffering from that terrible condition, and she had to go to Switzerland, I believe.
Yeah. They made a BBC drama about it, didn't they?
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to say. I know what you're saying, Trey. It's a bit,
but
of a stretch,
that's a bit different, because that's for someone who's living their life in pain and wants to die, so they're no longer in pain. This is just
he wanted to die.
Yeah, but did he truly deep down? I think at that age,
well, does anybody,
sorry?
Does anybody who kills themselves really want to die? When you get down to it, it's a very difficult subject to discuss and to categorize. 100%. We don't know how much pain he was in. When people, like, you often hear every now and again. No, Trey, I'm not saying it's in the same league. I'm talking about from a legal standpoint. I'm not talking morally. It isn't in the same league. You're right. What I'm talking about is with regard to the legalities of it. Assisted suicide is illegal here in the UK.
But I wouldn't say what she did is assisted suicide. It was egging someone on to commit suicide. There was no medical
no.
She wasn't assisting someone who was living his life in physical pain every day.
The kind of stretch I was trying to make is, if you believe that she, because it was brought up in the documentary, and even the doctor that they were speaking to, that was getting really questioned by the prosecution pretty avidly, he said that it was, I think it was him that mentioned that that she was trying to alleviate his suffering. That was part of her kind of motives behind it. If she's trying to alleviate the suffering, it's kind of related to assisted suicide in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? The principles are the same.
See, Anna's just said as well, a good deal of wanting to die with teenagers is wanting to be less lonely and understood. And I think it is. It's kind of that Romeo and Juliet complex. That's always on the school curriculums, that book, isn't it? And actually, I think Juliet was 13 in that book, and wasn't Romeo like 15? And so kind of suicide. And you look at, I mean, I've not watched it, but like these TV shows like 13 Reasons Why, and it's almost, I think, especially to young and easily influenced youth, almost glamorized.
Yeah. And this brings us nicely on to another factor which is massive in this, is the digital communications element to it. So that, you're in contact with someone 24 hours a day. You've got instant access to that person. So every feeling and emotion that you're expressing is getting conveyed all the time. So, he's got a direct contact with her. They're living in each other's pockets. Does that create, well, digitally speaking, does that create an unreality? Because you're looking at the words and you're interpreting the personality, because they've done more. It's like, when you're texting someone on a dating app and you get to know them. That, I mean, we've both had ups and downs with that fucking terrible situation. You develop a concept in your mind of what that person is, and when you go and meet them, it's either a positive or a negative reaction. It's like you can't help it. As humans, we have to. Our minds like to categorize. The kind of the left brain. It's continually putting people in boxes, situations, trying to judge. That's what they do.
I think their relationship was very toxic, and I guess because they were both the kind of people that are still sort of finding their personalities and their ways in the world, and they were people, I get the impression neither of them were particularly popular outside of their own families. So it's a difficult situation. I don't necessarily think living in this kind of text world is always like that, though. Is the film called You? Have you seen that? I think it's just no, Her. Sorry, not You. Her. It's called. And it's about a guy that basically falls in love with his AI and like takes her to the beach with him and stuff.
Sounds like Black Mirror.
It is a bit like Black Mirror kind of thing. I think that's why I enjoyed it. You should check it out if you haven't seen it. But it's kind of a nice commentary on modern technology and the way that, you know, we look for, if we're lonely, you know, literally everyone's got access to the internet. You can just jump on the internet, find some kind of app where you can speak to like-minded people or whatever, and then it's not always a bad thing, but at the same time, you can't vet people who become your friends the same way that you can when you meet someone in person. Interestingly, with this case, they met in person first of all, and then their relationship became more of a virtual thing.
And the thing is, there is a disconnect with this kind of relationship. You know, if your relationship is a digital one, predominantly. That's Michelle Carter's popped up in the chats. Maybe she can enlighten us. I believe it would create that much of a disconnect that you are not really seeing that person for who they are. You don't really. You're living in a fantasy world. She's watching Glee. She's following celebrities on Twitter who look not like real human beings. They don't talk like real human beings. They show the best side of their life. You know, you're texting somebody, and you're interpreting their words. If you message someone, you see, even if you use language face to face, and someone stood next to you, you lose so much from language. It's very difficult to accurately convey exactly what you're thinking.
You don't hear tone of voice. You can't see people's body language. I mean, how many arguments do all of us have by accident when you send something, a text that's taken in the wrong context? It happens all the time. Because people can't always get the tone of voice, whether it's a joke or, you know, just having a giggle, and sometimes it can go very wrong. With this case, though, interestingly, they also had a thing where they would keep kind of making plans to meet up, and then it would be backed out right at the last moment. I get
Lorna Ramona.
Well, yeah, but of course that's a bit different. But I very much get the impression that the two of them were quite happy with this romantic relationship being lived online.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've both been involved in relationships like that, and you know, you speak to somebody and you Skype them and all that kind of stuff, and you send a dick. What I mean is, you get in whatever you get. You're speaking predominantly digitally, right? As human beings, we're not meant to. We look people in the eyes, and you say you can see it in people's eyes. Listen, I don't want to get too fucking, I'm like with spirituality nonsense, but it's you know, people can say, you know, I can tell what you're thinking. I can see it in their eyes. It's how we communicate as humans. We're meant to, and you can't. There's a certain positive reaction that you get just in being someone's company. It's like biologically proven. If you hug someone, that you get we're meant to have physical contact with people, and just a hug can make you feel better and give you a biological kind of boost and things like that. If you're communicating someone, that's what I tell people, and just randomly hug them in the street. It's been scientifically proven. But do you get what I'm saying? All that is gone if you're talking to someone digitally. So you've lost that element of it. You're still probably lonely, but it's a distraction if you're talking to someone. And if you speak to them, it can make you feel a bit better, and you don't feel that pit of loneliness. But the underlying issue is still there. I think it's a huge factor in that relationship. So what I'm getting at is, did she kind of lose touch with the fact that there was a real human there? I know some people are going to say that that's fucking ridiculous. Of course she knew there was a real human there, and of course in a judgment system she did. But if you get so fixated with celebrity culture, texting, fucking Twitter nonsense, and you don't go out much and you're incredibly needy, I think your whole worldview can be skewed. And
Well, it can, but there's a big difference here to like someone that you're talking to romantically, yet at the same time encouraging to commit suicide. It's not the same as like we get every day someone just writing "kill yourself" in the comment section of our channels.
in fact, someone's just written that now.
It's most I've had to turn off YouTube comments on my phone because it's just KYS over and over again. But no, but yeah, it's not. I think the way things are online lead people to be very obnoxious and say stupid things without actually taking into account how other people feel and stuff. But they had met in person. Like she knew he was a human. It's not someone she could have just put in her mind as an app or a game on her phone or something. They had met in person, and according to her, in physical. But I personally don't know if neither of them came across as the sort of people that she was very. It's odd to say, but I would describe as innocent, to some extent, and he didn't really seem like the sort of guy that would. Even though she said he forced himself on her, didn't he, to someone, but her story changed a lot about that. But I don't know if they were ever even intimate. But they had met in person and spoken face to face. So you can't really say, well, has she dehumanized him?
No, I mean, it's just that, I'm not saying that that's the truth. Trey's just said that's like Christian groups saying video games caused school shootings. Anybody with real wisdom wouldn't think that somebody would sit down, play Grand Theft Auto, and then decide to go and shoot a load of people. But what it could
there's a BBC drama about that.
But what it could do, if you've got somebody that is very unhealthy mentally, and maybe he's even, he's got homicidal tendencies, he could just get ideas from that game or something. It's been known to happen, but obviously it's not as straightforward. Of course, video games don't cause people to. Video game is just another form of popular entertainment, just the same as movies, just the same as books. Movies and TV and video games have a more hypnotic quality than books do. But it's popular.
I disagree.
Okay.
When I start a good book, I will sit for like 6 hours until I finish it.
No, I didn't mean it like that. What I mean is, books are more healthy. When you're reading a book, it stimulates the imagination. It's like an exercise. That reading novels and things like that is your mind's equivalent of physical exercise. But if you're watching TV, you're kind of being manipulated by the way that the director tells the story.
Well, you could, like, watching something like this, obviously it gives you information you never had before, but you're only given the information that's told by the director or the producers that in the way they want to see it. It was quite odd today because I watched a couple more bits in preparation for this stream, and I was watching some ABC News stuff, and their story was very, very sympathetic towards her, whereas I think the documentary itself was certainly more in favour of Conrad's family.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it interesting that even the mother of Conrad said that she believed she believed that she was sick?
Yeah, she is, and I think partially though for Conrad's mother, I mean, what's she going to do? Like, be angry forever? She needs to kind of justify it in some way in her mind, and it probably is true to an extent. So if she say, okay, she had mental issues, I mean, the thing is, she didn't put a knife in him, but there is blood on her hands, but not directly.
Yeah, I mean, we can. That's the another component of the case, but I'm kind of. Someone put, who was it? Let me just go back to, maybe she just wanted the tragic love story to be a tragic figure. It did appear that way, didn't it? If you looked at the way that, like you said, there's the Glee thing where he died and she had this massive neediness, and it was like she was building a narrative of being this tragic character. Is that in tune with her feelings of loneliness and isolation? It's like it's very dark.
Well, it's you have to remember as well. That whole Glee sort of thing. It wasn't the male actor that she was so into. It was the female actor, and I think maybe there's maybe an extent of wanting to live a similar path, being so obsessed with a celebrity that you want to kind of experience the same emotions they've experienced. So she sort of manipulated the situation to what she wanted because she already had this guy that had suicidal tendencies in her life, maybe.
Yeah, it's this is what I'd really like. I can't come to any firm conclusions about her mindset. All I know is it's complicated. Like another element of her story and what the defence were heavily leaning towards, especially the expert that they called upon, was a dependency on mental health drugs like depression.
Mm-hmm.
She was on SSRIs, and then the medication got changed. Ironically, is that these medications can give you suicidal tendencies, which is odd considering they're supposed to alleviate depression or help with depression.
Yeah. Well, I see. Again, that's I guess that's a whole other topic. But I don't really know anything about these drugs. When you and I were growing up, there wasn't such a market for these kind of drugs.
It wasn't needed. Life's more complicated now, and that's generally what happens as society evolves. Life generally does get more complicated. It's like you always say, times were simpler. It wasn't any of this nonsense. You had one car, and there was no Sky, satellite TV, all that kind of stuff. So
walking down the cobbled streets to buy a loaf of freshly baked bread on your penny farthing.
Exactly, yeah. So it's there's a lot. It's like, let's look at the facts of her, right? She had these problems with loneliness, isolation. She was needy. She was anorexic, I believe. She was dependent on drugs. She was suicidal, so it seemed. She had quite a dark element to her, although she was kind of like, she had another side to her which was very popular from what people were saying. She was kind of looked upon as being very kind. Some people can put that on, can have this image and live up to this image, and then deep inside they feel a completely different way, and that can tear people apart. That could be an element of it with her.
I don't, because they make a big deal of her being voted in the school yearbook most likely to brighten your day, but at the same time, doesn't it sort of sound like one of those awards they just give to the kids that they haven't really got any other awards to give them?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It was difficult. You see, it's difficult to know exactly how she was perceived, and I suppose that's really important. It can give a little bit of a clue as to the kind of character she was. I suppose that's kind of important, but I think what we can establish is that she was very insecure and very needy.
Amanda James has just put it perfectly. She was friendly with everyone, but friends with no one.
Yeah, which would obviously give her these mental health problems and these anorexic tendencies as well. It's I can't really. I've not come to any conclusions about it. I think it's a complicated case with regard to her mental state.
Well, and I mean, are we going to talk about what's actually happened now then? Because basically she got such a long sentence, but that was then let out on bail. However, is she? Oh no, she's out again.
She will be, won't she? She was only given 15 months.
Okay. That's where I said 15 years earlier. I got confused.
No, she got given 15 months after the. Because the judge even said that a factor was her age, and that there's a chance of rehabilitation. So at the end, she didn't get charged with murder.
Well, I don't think she should. Personally, I don't think she should be charged with murder. I think it's really is it manslaughter or not is the case. I mean, had she set it up and put him in the car, then it would have been murder and held the door shut and not let him get out. But as much as she did, of course, encourage him to go ahead with it, which is what just shows kind of a complete lack of empathy for someone else. But at the end of the day, it was him who went through with it.
Yeah, it's difficult because the thing is, can we be sure exactly what she said to him?
Well, I would assume that she, in that phone call, I'm pretty sure she wasn't saying, "Please don't do this."
Yeah, I mean that is, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like it's a difficult.
It's difficult. At the same time, you have to wonder, why would you make up a lie like that? Why would you message your friend and say that? The only kind of sort of logical reason I could think that she would have to tell her friend that is because the guilt was weighing on her so heavily.
There was a moment when the prosecution lawyer, who was quite aggressive, was kind of summing it up and saying that it was all a attention. She got hooked into this. She didn't want to get made to look a liar in front of people, and saying that he's got mental health issues and stuff, and her head dropped and she looked incredibly guilty at that point, like she'd struck upon a nerve and it was getting to her. So it was all like an attention thing. That if that was edited correctly, and that's what she was you don't know whether that's what she was really like when she was when the prosecution barrister lawyer was saying it. Do you remember which bit I mean, Adam?
No.
Right. It was the prosecution. I think it was in the first part or the beginning of the second part was where that rather aggressive female lawyer, who's very good, was basically saying, she it was all for attention. Really, yeah. She got caught in this kind of trap and didn't want to let go, and it was more important to her that she was not made out to be a liar than actually save his life. And her head dropped and she looked guilty at that point. It really stood out to me, that bit. Like I said, if the editing wasn't manipulated, which you'd fucking hope it wouldn't be.
No, well, that's also another interesting point to the case that we haven't touched on, is that 2 days before this actually happened, she sent all her friends a message saying, "Oh my God, he's killed himself, he's gassed himself in the car," basically like to test out their reactions.
Yeah, that is very, very worrying, isn't it? It's like, why would you do that? It's very, very worrying. It's like, but the thing is, there's more. That is disturbing, and if you're going to look at that kind of behaviour, there doesn't seem to be any kind of get out for her. But I'm not convinced that she was of sound mind.
She was.
So how much responsibility does she have?
But she also, at the same time, she's not off her rocker insane. And I think we very much, and again, I don't want to sort of stray too much from the topic at hand, but I think we very much live in a world where we're a bit too forgiving of people's actions because they've got some sort of mental problem. It's like, well, if you're not institutionalized and you're fit to live in the world, you've got to have the conscience and empathy and understanding of your actions towards others to be able to do that. And stop just saying, well, I mean, there's small things you could get away with. I had a lack of judgment because I've got this issue or something. But when it comes to people's lives, if you're not, if you're allowed to live in the free world, you should have at least that judgment to know that encouraging people to harm themselves is wrong. And if you don't, you probably should be in an institution.
You're right. She wasn't insane, but there are mitigating circumstances. Basically, the defence said that they'd always be trying to overturn it. Whether they'll still be doing that now because she's out, I don't know. But it does seem to be quite clear from the medical evidence that's available these days that these SSRIs can be quite damaging to people. We don't really fully understand brain chemistry 100% scientifically. It's a really, you see, the thing is, it affects does it affect your judgment system? It affects your mood. It affects the way you handle your emotions. I haven't come to any. It's a very complicated issue that I can't accurately convey the way I'm thinking. I don't think things are. You see, the problem also is you have to set a precedence with something like this. If you just let her off scot-free, if people were in a similar situation, they might not think twice and might try and use it as an excuse to harm somebody that they don't like.
Yeah.
So you have to set a precedence and put a marker down and say, no, this kind of behaviour is not acceptable. You can't just fucking be in that position. And the judge's argument was she was in a position. Diminished responsibility is a great way of putting it there. Thanks for that. But she was in a position where all she had to do was say a couple of words potentially and save his life, maybe. You can see both sides of the arguments. He kind of...
At that point, do you not think it was a bit like they were flogging a dead horse anyway? I wonder if, to an extent, she thought it was just kind of a game and it never really would happen. But then she does become quite aggressive about him doing it. So I don't know. But I wonder how much. And again, I wonder how much it affected her the times that he did say he was killing himself and then disappeared off. I mean, that's like hell to put someone through. That's a really cruel thing to do to people.
Yeah, I mean, you can't exactly put yourself into that mindset. It's like you've got another person there who's clearly suffering and clearly needs help, and you're talking about, you need to do it this time, you need to do it that time, make sure, it's very difficult to understand the mindset of someone who would do that, especially if you love somebody. The only thing that I can think of is she's in that much pain herself that is just a reality of her existence. That some people do suicide pacts, don't they? Because there was a big thing about that, wasn't there? It didn't seem to be the case with her because she was reveling to some degree in what had actually happened. I don't know if reveling's the right way of putting it, but she was enjoying the attention and the aftermath, wasn't she? The photos of the... It wasn't behaviour that you would attribute to somebody who you could argue caused his death.
Yeah.
It didn't sit right with me, that bit. It's like, it's not... I don't think the case is cut and dry, but she's not... It didn't paint the picture of an innocent, troubled person 100% me. I think that there are issues to consider.
Well, I think something else that's quite interesting is that I don't think there's any point now. It was Amanda James said she's read all the texts, which we haven't. But there's one point quite earlier in their relationship where he says, "Shall we kill ourselves together?" And she's like, "No way, I'm not doing that." And I don't think there's any point where she ever sort of goes, well, if you leave this planet, I'm leaving this planet, or anything like that. It's always like, just kill yourself. I'll be fine. But I think she even says to him, like, there's sort of implications that, like, oh, I'll be... That's it. She says, like, I'll be there for your family. I'll make sure to make them... That's kind of very creepy. Like, who wants to be around that amount of death that's not... it is that's what's weird. Maybe it's like a false sense of responsibility, but misplaced. Like, she knows it's her fault, but now she wants to help the family because it is. It's a bit like that. Have you watched Dead to Me show?
I've not seen that, but are you trying to say she put herself in she created a narrative of the grieving widow and the attention that she would get and starting this charity, and she was living that kind of narrative?
Yeah, I think so. And I think maybe she didn't really understand that people didn't really for people to have got the level of like sympathy and attention I think she was looking for. Is there any photos of them even together or anything? It's not like they were plastered all over Facebook or anything. So how much this person who lives an hour away from him, how much sympathy can you have if she says I was his girlfriend? And like the only people that really knew that they were doing anything together was her sort of few mates. Or when I say doing anything together, like even talking, I mean, was her mates that she would sort of text desperately to hang out with her. And I don't think most of them listened or cared to anything she was saying. So, I've forgotten what I was about to say next.
That's alcohol for you.
I'm not drinking.
Really?
I had one rum and coke on my stream earlier.
That's drinking.
But I'm not drunk.
You're permanently drunk, dude.
No, I'm not drunk tonight.
My kind of
work tomorrow.
inkling of was that she became disconnected from reality. That's a possible theory, in that the digital
Well, I think they
world.
both are, though. I
Yeah.
think they
So
both.
if she's disconnected from reality, does that make her less culpable?
No, again, I think it comes down to what I said before. If you're that disconnected from reality, you should probably be somewhere where they can rehabilitate you until you
But
can
if
be
you're
in. Yeah.
disconnected from reality, you're not going to know it, are you? You're not going to know, because if you're aware that you're disconnected from reality, you're not disconnected from reality.
Well, I think maybe it's not being disconnected from reality, but you have to have a certain amount of empathy and understanding of people. I think even at 17, she must have been aware that her actions were not good. I think that very beginning bit where the police officer comes and takes her phone, and she's like, "Oh, you're taking my phone," and she knows she's in a lot of trouble there, so she's aware that her actions have not been without reproach, might be putting it a little bit lightly. But she knows she's about to be in big trouble because she knows that she's not acted morally correctly. So if she's aware of that, then she's aware that what she did at the time, no matter how she justified it, was not okay. And it's odd because, like what I was saying before about her trying to maybe alleviate her guilt by going and helping the family, I think now is more actually part of her sort of fantasy of what should happen. Like in her mind, they had been in this, I don't know, like this massive sort of really romantic relationship, and everyone was going to feel sympathy for her, and it just didn't turn out like that. Like she had to kind of garner her own sympathy by starting that softball match tournament.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree. There's a lot of alarming behaviour. You can't. Only an idiot would deny that. I mean, she fucking got him to kill himself. It's like, here's a question for you. Do you think, from the information that you've got, he would have killed himself without her being there?
Now, that's a really, really interesting question, because I suppose that's what it all comes down to at the end. Without her influence, would he have done? And I don't think he would have done. I think he might have got to the same point where he was in the car, but I think if he had got out the car and gone, why am I doing this?
You've got to go deeper than that. If she wasn't in his life at all, or if she was in his life and she was supportive and completely abhorrent to his suicidal tendencies. So, for instance, let's just say that she wasn't in his life at all, or let's say that she was in his life, but she was supportive and, not into this idea of suicide at all, which is what people of sound mind would be.
But I mean, the idea of suicide was in his mind from before he started talking to Michelle Carter.
Well, exactly, that's the point I'm getting at. So he already...
Whether or not he would have gone through it, because I mean, the thing is, suicidal thoughts are a lot more common in everyone than I think people realise. But I think the majority of people sort of realise that it would, it's not the best idea, or they're too cowardly to do it, or, just they might think about it and think, oh, things would be easier. But at the end of the day, they know that it's not the right thing to do because of their families and stuff. And we only sort of very briefly touched on it earlier. He did have a very hard time with his dad. Like his dad beat the shit out of him one night, didn't he? Yeah. So you don't know how often that was going on.
He was a troubled guy. He was a troubled guy.
But you can't say, oh, his parents were angels. I mean, I can't imagine how that would be like to come home and your dad just starts beating you up. Didn't he say it was something to do with and maybe I'm getting confused because I was watching Live PD earlier, but to do with a macaroni and cheese pan.
Okay.
Like him saying, "Oh, I'll clean it up after this TV show" or something, and his dad was like, "No, you'll do it now," and ended up just beating the shit out of him. So, he had a troubled home life.
Yeah, I mean that's we've kind of established that he was troubled and obviously had these deep-seated suicidal tendencies. Anybody to actually to go through that with that, regardless of the coercion, is going to be troubled. I get the feeling that he you can't say for certain how strong the desire is for someone with the information that we've got, especially how strong the desire was for him to commit suicide. It was obviously strong, but did he need that kind of encouragement? Encouragement is the wrong word, because encouragement is usually a positive thing, but in this case it's negative. So this kind of coercion is probably a better way of putting it. Would he have done it without that level of coercion from her? This is somebody, we don't know how much he felt this love, but he trusted her. If she was the only person that he spoke to about it, if she would have tried to help him in the right way, my opinion, for what it's worth, is she wouldn't have killed herself. He wouldn't have killed himself.
Well, I think we'll never truly know the answer to that, but he certainly would have had more of a chance without her.
Let's just say that she was nurturing and supportive, and I love you, please don't do it, I wouldn't be able to live,
But their relationship was never like that, and that was kind of on both of them. Like the way they spoke to each other was very, the journalist guy, I actually thought he was very good in the documentary. The guy from Esquire magazine, was it Esquire or GQ? Esquire, I think.
It was Esquire.
Yeah, and he's saying, well, there was actually this sort of odd competitive element between the two of them that could sometimes sort of have a nasty tone to it as well. So they probably were really bad for each other, and had they just said fuck off after a month or two, but it's very, when you're that age and you've got no kind of local romantic interest, and especially when you're that age and perhaps you're a bit self-conscious of your body or concerned about having sexual experiences, it can be easier just to live out the romance side of things without having to worry about the icky side of things. I mean, they're not icky now, we're adults, but back then, or not knowing what to do, you can just have that sort of virtual relationship. However, they were kind of two very lonely, very, I guess, toxic, or perhaps not toxic people, but people who were dealing badly with their own mental issues, shouldn't have brought someone else into that. But it's very hard, especially at that age, to sort of cut off
they
and go.
Wanted somebody.
Yeah.
They kind of I hope people don't say this the wrong way, but they needed each other in a toxic way.
Well, they thought they needed each other, probably.
They didn't need each other for positivity. They didn't need each other at all, but they thought they needed each other. One interesting thing, that when I was asking the question of would she have done it without him, would she have been a nurturing girlfriend or partner, whatever, is that, don't forget, as we've already touched upon, that he said that that if you tell anybody about this, I'm going to hate you. So in other words, is it possible that, let's say she did turn into this, I love you, I don't want you to do this, he could have, this is speculation, that he could have just ended it and not been, because they each wanted somebody to feed into their toxicity, didn't they? Because when you develop this kind of toxic psyche and you are living on this knife edge, and your life is full of darkness, and you don't know, you've not got the right guidance, it becomes your reality, and you don't want to let go of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think their relationship could, it should have. To be honest, for me at that age, like when I was seeing those texts in the documentary, it was very foreign to me. I think at that age, like 18, 17, and I had a girlfriend, I was so overly romantic and nice, maybe a bit overly possessive or jealous because I was still learning things, but never like so sort of toxic and at times deprecating of the other person.
I mean, there's a lot of I'll kill myself if you leave me these days, isn't there? The suicide thing gets thrown around a lot. It's kind of it's tragic that people die of their own hands, and people feel the need. It's like whenever you hear about somebody that's done that, and some people may say, selfish bastard, how could he do that? I always think you don't know the pain that person was in. Sometimes it can just be overwhelming, and life's tough, and it's ridiculously complex, human life.
you'll never. We've both read that book, that selfie book, and there's a brilliant part of that that always sticks in my mind about how everyone always makes themselves the hero of their own story.
That was a great part of the book. You're right.
Yeah, and like you. And I think everyone does, even in Michelle Carter's mind, she probably, and only her will ever know or understand this, has probably justified things to herself and thinks that her actions were the right actions at the time. Whether or not that's changed now and she feels more guilty or anything, we don't know. But it's very, whatever's going on in people's minds, like no matter, like someone might do something completely heinous, but from their perspective, they're doing what they think is correct, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. That I agree.
And they'll justify it in ways like you could. I always used to think, like, when I had girlfriends and we got into arguments, and I always used to, like, I guess it's probably my sort of pious self-righteousness as well, but I always used to think, I wish I could film this and just show it to people and see how right I am and how unreasonable she's being.
I did that in my 30s, dude.
Did you? And how did it work out? Or do you just mean you had that same thought?
I threatened the other person with it and said I'm going to start recording our conversations because the arguments became so toxic. And there's no point going into that. We'd be here all fucking night. But no, of course.
But then I think if I recorded those conversations and played them to people, they might have been like, well, no, she's got a good point. You know, you just never know. But in my mind, like, my side of the argument is always the justified and correct side.
That you cannot have an argument with a fully conscious person. It takes two idiots to have an argument. You don't ever need to get involved. One has a.
I think in relationships it's a bit different because you're in each other's pockets all the time.
I'm not saying it's easy. Of course, it's the hardest thing in the world to do. But you cannot have an argument with a fully conscious person. You have to lose your cool to get involved in an argument to some degree. But anyway, we're getting into fucking. Should we do a stream next week about the ifs and buts of relationships? Two people who are not married yet,
not married, don't have girlfriends, no kids. Yeah, we're the authority on. Yeah, so next week we're going to tell you guys how you can win at love.
Yeah. Oh, there's 0 people in the stream, Adam. I don't understand. We've been here for 3 hours. Why is nobody listening to our bullshit? Why won't anybody believe our ridiculous, crazy stories? Oh, right, that's the reason. Yeah, so I just very briefly, because it does boil down to one question: was she responsible for his death?
Not directly, but she has to take. I would say 30% if you were going to force me on an answer.
I wouldn't be able to come up with a figure. Maybe I'm just sitting on the fence. I haven't come to a conclusion yet. Oh, well, look at that comment that's just been put on there. I really appreciate that.
It's very kind.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we can't come to a conclusion, so it's not that interesting. But I appreciate the feedback. That's great. I don't know.
It took him to commit the action, but again, we'll never be allowed to know the narrative of had she not been around or had she been supportive. We'll never know the answer to that, but she was the only one that had the chance to actually kind of save him other than himself. So I wouldn't say it's 50-50, but no. It's definitely...
Yeah, no, there is one conclusion that I've come to, is that I do not believe that she should have got away with it, and she hasn't. So I do believe some justice has been served for what it's worth. It's just an opinion.
Do you think 15 months was a fair amount of time?
I don't know because I don't know. I'm inkling towards that it was a little bit too lean, but I also think about the mitigating factors in that she was on these psychotic drugs. It will have affected her judgment potentially. And she's very young. You've got to appreciate that your brain's a mush. But it's, we're not talking about getting drunk and getting involved in a brawl. We're talking about someone dying. So it's really complicated. I don't know. I don't know. I think in order to make an informed decision, I have to have all available facts. I have to know exactly what she was like in her personal life, how much pain she was in, how much trauma she'd experienced, what the relationship exactly was like, what she exactly said to him. We don't know exactly what she said to him, under what circumstances. What's interesting to me is, why didn't she give evidence? If I was on, well, I mean, it wasn't a jury trial, but if I was, let's just say there was a jury, I'd want to hear from her. I'd want to see her reaction. I'd want to see if there was genuine remorse. I want to hear it from her. But I suppose I'm getting into the realms of silliness here because.
Well, I think that's kind of part of the reason they didn't have a jury, though, because, you know, if she wasn't capable of showing the remorse they wanted, like I said, because it was going to be a jury of her peers, so it's going to be people around her age group, and I think. The defence lawyer said after losing the case that had he had another opportunity, he may well have gone for a jury. But at the time, before the case started, I think it seemed like the most sensible idea, because putting her in front of 12 people of her age and showing them those text messages, I think it would have been a straight guilty verdict anyway. So I don't think the outcome would have been really different had it been a jury rather than just a judge.
I think there's one thing I can be certain of. She'll be going, thank fuck for that.
Yeah.
And there is one thing that really made me piss. Where was that guy said, well, I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with her.
Yeah. But that guy was about 65. I was like, yeah, you would.
I was already in the process of trying to find her on Facebook.
Oh, I bet you are.
No, but see, I thought that was funny though. I was like, well, put it this way, I don't want to be an ex-boyfriend.
I would want to date her next.
Have you got a sister?
But it's funny when they did kind of the talking head bits with the public, how divided they were as well. It's a completely divisive case. Like it's really strange how. In fact, I'd say in this chat, most people are like, yep, she's guilty. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of people as well that are like, well, how guilty can you be from a few hundred miles away?
It's really, the more you delve into it, the more interesting this case actually is, because there's so many elements to it, or components. You could talk about. We could do a stream just on one component, like. A background. It's like I'd really like to know all of the details. The documentaries were very good. I think the editing towards the end of the second one was a bit shit. I think they dwelled too much on the case with unnecessary. But anyway, I'm getting into film critic mode now. But I'd like to know all the facts, because do you understand what I mean? I'd like a full transcript of the text messages. To know, to have a psych evaluation report on her, how much medication she was on, what scientifically they say happens to you. That's cheers for bringing that up, KR. There was an abundance of Lorne's Boston cap in that documentary, which it's set in Massachusetts, wasn't it?
Massachusetts, yeah, isn't it? So Boston would be their big team, wouldn't it?
And I love Boston. What a great city. What an amazing city. I'd probably been going back around about this time if we weren't in the middle of a global meltdown. So what, we're 77 minutes in and we haven't come to any conclusions. Well, we've come to a couple, haven't we?
We have, but I don't think we could talk about it until 6 a.m. and we won't come to a definitive answer on how guilty she is, or whether she is or isn't, or how much responsibility she should take, or how much jail time. I mean, that's not our things to decide anyway, but it's just an interesting thing to
None of it is our thing to decide.
Yeah, well, no. Look, I just get a call. We were just wondering what you thought Michelle Carter should get. I haven't come to a decision yet, Judge. Oh, for fuck's sake, Adam.
Yeah, Netflix. Hello, this is God. Free Jones of Netflix. We're wondering if you'd like to make a documentary and come to a definitive answer. No problem.
I like the last tanker's definitive answer. She didn't even... I mean, more people should definitely use that in court cases, because I'm sure the judge will just start throwing it out. Like,
Can you imagine, like, in random cases, if there was just ridiculous excuses, never meant to do it, I was raised by my mom, my brother didn't give me mac
I
and
was
cheese.
raised by my mom. So, why did you steal this old lady's handbag? I was raised by my mom. Oh, okay. Case dismissed.
Yeah, can you name any reason why you didn't go to his aide and tell him to stop this behaviour? I can't name any.
I can't remember what happened yesterday, but if you give me a year, I'll tell you what pattern's got me in this trouble. Okay, case dismissed. 1 year.
Mr. Armstrong, it was a year ago. This is the trial.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought we were trying to make things more professional and move away from the To Catch a Predator stuff.
Oh, people love it. There's nothing wrong with a bit of fun.
Yeah.
A bit of TCAT related fun. But yeah, should we wrap it up?
Yeah. What time is it now? 12:30.
Conclusion
Really?
is women are dirty.
Yeah. Well, the best ones.
Yeah. Yeah, just in case anybody isn't a fan of The Office, that's where that quote is from. So I'm quoting a fictional character. That is not the personal opinions of Andrew Burkett.
Before there's a Twitter campaign to have you cancelled.
Yeah, and we don't want to go there again.
No.
Yeah, so Adam, dude, thank you very much. It's been an incredibly interesting conversation. Thank you for your insight, dude. It's been good.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Guys, thank you so much in the chat. I really appreciate you getting involved and bringing your opinions forward. We've had a few disagreements, which is cool. Don't want everybody to say, you know what, Andrew, you know what you're talking about. Fucking crack on. That's why we do these. And it's good that... Shut up, you. It's good that... It's good that you've enjoyed doing something a bit different, even though we did touch upon Lorne's kind of, amusing inadequacies at the end. But, we can have a bit of fun. But it's an interesting case. We may talk about it a bit more. We might try doing a bit more digging on various aspects of it and see if we can uncover some more evidence and have a... thanks, Trey. Really appreciate it. It was good to see you, Cat G, and in Corb We Trust. Thanks everybody. Nietzsche's Ghost, I really appreciate your positive comments as well about the stream. I'm really glad you've enjoyed it. And thank you for the sub as well. Thanks for bringing new people over to my channel, Adam.
It's alright, least I can do with this amount of popularity. Spread my seed.
Humble to the end is my friend Adam.
Always.
And on that note of... Adam's big head, we will wrap it up. But thanks so much, guys. I hope you have a good Friday evening. It's getting very fucking late here now, so I'm going to have to get going. So take care, and we'll probably be doing another one of these soon. So I'll speak to you soon.